Uh, 1 and 2 and 3 are 1 air. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of the day, everyone. Thanks for joining Large Scale Scrub Meetup of New York City. It's a virtual event, one of many series. Please allow me to first, wish everyone safety and happy Monday. But then I would like to go ahead and introduce our special speaker today. His name is Tim Abbott. He's an enterprise and startup coach. He's actually, Tim, correct me if you're American born, but you have lived for X number of years now in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in the States, between Houston and Oklahoma, and been in Saudi for about 13 years.
Wow. Okay. So you have a lot of experience that it's truly international. So about Tim a little more. He's an accredited coach and trainer in various aspects of business agility, foundational principles, HR, facilitation, coaching, scaling, fundamentals, and more. And he also passionately enjoys helping organizations unlock the potential of their people, products, and processes. Now, what makes me, creates more affinity to Tim, at least on my part, is that he's also a part of the LESS community, and he's one of the trainers aspirants. And I think he would be a great asset to have today to share his views and his novelties. And I don't want to burn too much gas in this. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass it on to you. Kindly ask everyone to stay on mute. If you have any questions, ping them in the chat. I will pick it up from there and I'll post it to Tim. And the video will be available, as well as, I think I have to pay $9.99 for the deck if there's any. Can you share your screen, or should I give you permissions to do so?
I should be able to share it. No, I can't. It says I don't have permission.
Okay, so let me give you. I'll remove, allow spotlight, names. Make host. I have to make you a host, and then you should be able to. And then I'm going to lose my host and privileges. So, so you're the host now.
Okay, great. Okay, guys. Once again, thanks, Gene. Thanks for the introduction. It's great to be in New York City, even though I'm a little ways away. But it seems you guys have a great community there, and kind of what I'm going to be discussing is just a bit of a discussion I had earlier with some coaches and kind of a little back and forth with one of the LESS coaches, but it's just to think about kind of when we think about when we're going into transformation, that's really a big word, and I want to get it back. I want to talk about how we can get back to focusing on building customer-centric products, right? So most of what we do is about enabling and helping people build great products and build great organizations that build great products, right? But the foundation of that is in product development, right? So being able to create products that solve problems for people. Okay, so without further ado, I will play a quick video, probably quick 2 videos, and one of them I like a lot. So let me just share my screen here.
Founded Mass Challenge with a mission to catalyze a global renaissance. We launched this at the very depth of the recession when the Dow was below 7,000 because society and business in particular has become just way obsessed with greed, short-term profit extraction, and not focused enough on value creation. So you guys are the value creators. As a society, rather than fight over slices of the existing pie, we would rather make more pie. And that's what you guys are all about. Creating new value, creating new companies, solving new problems, creating more wealth, more jobs, more growth, more optimism, hope, excitement, and passion. And that's what the world should be about, not just fighting over slices and who gets the biggest share of profit, but actually doubling, quadrupling the amount of profit. So in the next decade, 2 decades, the size of the global market is going to double and double again. I want you all to be at the leading edge of that, so we get to define what that system looks like. And rather than have it be one based on short-term exploitation of labor and raw materials and a place to dump our waste, I would much rather foster a collaborative environment in which we are all solving massive problems and unlocking all of the incredible intellectual capacity around the world in a much, much better system designed to help the world. We have several billion people around the world that are living on less than $10 a day. Many of them don't have access to water, food, opportunity, connectivity, but they will. We are just getting started. We are nowhere close to done yet. The next step in our journey together is to bring this to every person on the planet. So we will do anything we can to help you. If it's humanly possible, we will get it done.
So hopefully we're all now motivated to create more value. So let me start the slideshow. So after that kind of motivational speech, we have to bring ourselves back to reality here. So I'll play one small last video. So one of my favorite books, in general, I call it my favorite Agile book, right? So it's not really a book about Agile at all. It's a book by Ben Horowitz. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And what I love about it is that it takes the reader through what, building a business, seeing a business grow, dramatically, then seeing it sink dramatically, and all of the emotions and the things that are done to bring it to, kind of successful conclusion. I love it because one, it reminds me of my own personal story when I came to Saudi Arabia. I came on a contract. I had a contract with the local government entity. We got my company. We started out as 6 people. We got up to nearly 100 people. We grew, and then the bottom fell out of the company, and so we were scrambling to figure out how to making a good deal of money to going to almost having nothing. So I experienced the gamut of that, and then to finally building out a product. We were initially a services company, an agile services company, and when the bottom fell out of the company, we then pivoted to building a product, and that product did really well, and then we ended up exiting in 2015. So this company, this book, there's a lot of advice in this book that really hits home, and I like to talk about it because agile coaches, as agile coaches and agilists, we like to give a lot of advice, right? So, but if you haven't been through the ups and downs of trying to run a company and keep food on the table, and based on running a company that's growing and high flying, and then seeing all of the challenges that happen when the business drops out of it, it's very difficult to get perspective to senior leadership, right? and that's basically what I do. I'm just going to give you kind of a background. I mostly work with senior leaders now. I definitely still work with a lot of teams, but I advise, the executive suite on how to, build great products and build great companies that build great products, right? So that's the majority of what I do. Probably, half my time is spent with leadership, and then, probably a quarter of my time is spent with their teams. Okay, and then I generally work with a team of coaches, and that's what I'm doing now as well. Okay. So as we all know, there's a huge economic impact of COVID-19, right? So this huge economic impact, there's a market impact, and that market impact is going to have, a lot of negative. There are a lot of negative consequences of that market impact. So when we're looking at giving it, the normal advice that we normally give, we have to be cognizant of kind of where the markets are, what are the external and internal pressures that are going on in the companies that we're working in, and really kind of rethink, kind of the advice that we're giving to organizations. And here's a conversation I was having just today with one of the great coaches. He's really a great coach, and one of the things he talks about is setting up the organizational kind of operating system to be able to be agile. Okay, right? So we were going back and forth, and I told him, well, I don't think this is absolutely necessary, right? So when you're starting down an agile journey, and where you're working with teams trying to quote unquote transform, it's really about helping those teams build better products. Okay, and so when we're talking about building better products, right, there's some things that obviously have to be there, and I'll get into what some of those things are, but some of those things don't actually necessarily have to be there from the start. And so it's not really akin to building putting the wrong piece of software on an operating system, because that operating system is hopefully going to improve throughout the journey, right? So I wouldn't start with the domains of quote unquote business agility. Now, the people that run the Business Agility Institute are a lot smarter than I am, right? But I wouldn't necessarily start here, because it really is about building customer-centric products. And some organizations can have, especially large multinationals or very large organizations, can have some areas of the organization, as we've all seen, that can be more agile, and other areas of the organization that are, quote unquote, a bit less agile. Okay, and I certainly wouldn't start just organizationally. I wouldn't start, and I wouldn't do something like this, right? So we've all seen kind of a picture like this, where we have this kind of discovery and delivery, where you have a bunch of people that do discovery, and then once we figured it out, once we've tested it, wow, we've tested it and it's ready to go, and now we're ready to deliver. I definitely wouldn't do that, right? So because that's just not the right way to build products that are going to serve customers, because those delivery teams over to the right are going to be detached from customers, right? And so obviously I definitely wouldn't do this, right? So when you go into a large organization, I wouldn't, I certainly would never, ever keep those teams that are responsible for building out great products away from customers. Okay, so this is what is really important from our perspective. Obviously, unless it's not like that, but I'm saying from our perspective, if we're looking at really making impact, then I would do something that, kind of what the less perspective, looking at who are the users or customers, and what are their problems, and how can we serve them, right? So when we're looking at this, right, you guys, you're in the less meetup, so you know this very well. It's critically important that we understand the core problems that our users have, understanding the problem space, right, and trying to build out, as we scale out, we scale out with cross-functional teams, right, that can address and work with problems of users and look at opportunities, market opportunities for users and market opportunities in general, right? So this is critically important that our perspective is shaped more like this, right? So when we're looking at the organization, once again, when we're talking about business agility, and we're talking about all of the domains of business agility, that's a lot to swallow, right? That's I'll give an example. If I go to any CEO, because some of them are friends now, right? So they're my clients. I coach, if you see, I coach in a large organization where there's there's a CEO, and I go and I say, well, you've got to change all this, otherwise we're not going to be able to do anything. That's going to be a lot to take in, and probably that's not going to work, right? Because that type of change, not being able to see change, more immediately, and I don't mean that we have to accelerate the rate of change. I mean that when we're discussing with people that have, when we're discussing with organizations whose market has really changed dramatically, whose teams are losing jobs, who really are in a very kind of chaotic state. They don't understand that their sales are lagging compared to where they thought they were going to be. It's really important to understand and have, just as we ask leadership to have empathy with leadership, to help them understand what's important, and that we understand what's important to get these particular companies more positioned to be able to deliver value to the marketplace, okay? And really look closely at where the marketplace is, okay? And so, one of the questions that Kareem asked me about was, okay, if you don't need all of that in order to build great products, then give me an example, right? So I give an example of a company I used to work at, a company called VML. These were functional, this is a company arranged functionally, not really cross-functional teams. Functional managers, functional departments, QA teams, DB teams, so on and so forth. But one of the most innovative places I've ever worked in my life, right? And one of the best agile place, not one of the absolute best agile places I've ever come across. And that's because while the entire operating system, as he calls it, wasn't there, the actual culture was there, and that it enabled these teams to work kind of in a cross-functional way. So while I know Craig and his Larman's laws, when he mentions that culture follows structure, in this case, it really wasn't the case, right? So the structure was also, from a pure agilist perspective, the structure was definitely unoptimal. It wasn't the best culture. I mean, it wasn't the best structure, but the culture was incredible. Okay, so the culture created an environment where people worked together, even though they had functional managers, they had functional departments. They worked in component team. They worked in these kind of functional structures, but the teams worked cross-functionally. Okay. Now, one of the things that we've done kind of here in Saudi Arabia is building great products across a number of domains. Like, so I said I came here in 2007. I was leading the product development for a large government program that was for the Ministry of Interior. Ministry of Interior here. It was an e-services program that basically, so they didn't have a concept of agile contracts or anything like that. So we were on something called an operations contract. Okay. So in this operations contract, So in this operations contract, there's, basically, a team of 60 of us. Okay. So I was, quote unquote, so my official title was project manager. I was basically a scrum master. But contractually, my official title was project manager. We had a program manager that worked as basically officially as the product owner. I was a scrum master, and we had a couple of other coaches that I hired that were working with a team of about 60, from mainframe developers to front-end developers to back-end, full stack developers, and kind of operations type people, infrastructure. We had everything: infrastructure, support, so on and so forth, all working cross-functionally across different customer-centric areas of specific services. Okay, so basically how we did this. There's a picture here of, and this doesn't really capture quite how bad this was, just from a user or citizen perspective. Okay, citizen so we have citizens and we have expats, basically. So citizens and expats used to go to this place called Jawazat, which is basically the passports department. So think of, in the States, I never went to something called the passports department. I did my passport application at a post office. But there's something called the passports department, and the MOI has different segments of, they have prisons, they have passports, they have driver's license, they have all of these various kind of functional entities within the Ministry of Interior. So if you to the left, you'll see an actual kind of this is one of the services. This is actually a traffic ticket I got. So basically what it says is that I got a ticket because I was holding my phone while driving. So I have at the bottom here, you'll see something where it says 500. That's the fee. That's the fine I got. So I have to pay 500 real, which is about $140 for holding a phone with me while I'm driving. So instantaneously, there's a camera, obviously, and it took a picture, and then there's some automation component of this whereby from that it issues a ticket. It knows, basically, based on some machine learning algorithm, that it just does some computer aided. So using OpenCV does some image matching based on the position of the phone, so on and so forth, and then tells you, if this is, a valid ticket or not. And you can basically protest it if you like, using the system. But basically this system, these overall services were built out, once again, understanding the pains that citizens and expats were going to these government entities. And so one of the things that we used to bring in is that from the various entities within the government, we used to bring in kind of these focus groups when testing out, the different services. So so initially, when we first pitched the project, we tried to sell, or we tried to tell them to, use an agile method, launch a new service every month, and that would help. They wanted to launch everything and an entire portal with about 20 new services, 20 new e-services for the entire population, mind you. And that just was not going to work, obviously, right? So you have an entire population that has to learn the new applications, and it was going to flood our support system. So we finally convinced them, and so from that, like I said, we had about 5 teams, so 5, customer-centric teams that used to work with different different kind of customer focus areas within. So we had stakeholders obviously within the ministry. We had kind of customer focus groups, and from that, this is the most famous application in the country now. It has, if you go to these government entities, you would find that people just generally are not there, right? Because everything is electronic. It's they keep launching additional services, but it really has transformed. It was the first kind of government e-service application or set of applications, and now Saudi is, it's I would say from a government perspective, it's much more digital than the States. So that is, it drastically changed. It's what people know me for. It's the first thing they mentioned. Well, Tim led that, this e-service project because it's the most famous in the country. But it really had a major impact. And the point I'm making is that looking at what the kind of the core problems are from a customer-centric perspective is key to being able to deliver value, right? Here's another interesting team I met when I was in Kenya. So my company, Upskillable, we have a team in Kenya. And so I visit Kenya sometimes. Well, I visit, all different parts of the world, but visit East and West Africa. So one of the interesting things that I've seen in these parts of the world is that kind of focus on looking at where problems are, looking at, kind of where critical societal problems are, right? So these critical societal problems, where they are and how to solve them. So this is now a large company. It started out as a startup. It's now a large company that's basically enabling the supply chain from farmers to the market. So basically, there are 2 startups like this, one in Senegal and one in Kenya. And what they do is they create demand. So one of these startups is a crowdfunding platform. So the one in Senegal creates helps organizations or people invest in products. So what they do is that they go out to individual micro investors and say, look, we're helping facilitate kind of a co-op of farmers, and these co-op of farmers get assigned certain items to grow and produce, and they're funded for their production so that they can produce more and generate more income. Also, what they do is they find buyers in the marketplace to buy the actual produce. So large grocery chains and things like this. So they find these buyers, and these specific buyers, make deals on the crop production, which gives the actual individual farmer a much greater yield at the end of the day. So it returns and invests it returns something to the individual farmers. It organizes the actual farm, the actual crops that are produced, so that competition is managed a bit better, and it delivers value to the individual investors. And so these two, this is another instance of looking at kind of a localized problem and finding an incredible solution that not only delivers, obviously return on investment, but delivers something of value to all parties involved. Okay, and so when we're once again these teams, so looking at these teams and how they're structured, they're looking at individual problems and working within the customers. And so when we're looking at, I know you guys probably work with large enterprises and looking at, and those enterprises have a lot of, large enterprises generally have a lot of chaos and internal infighting and so on and so forth, that makes it somewhat difficult to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. But trying to work, getting sponsors to sponsor individual work teams to be able to do experiments is going to be faster at delivering some sort of value. Obviously, there will be upstream challenges, but some sort of value working in product development and new products or new innovative solutions, that are part of, the organization, then creating an organizational operating system that has to be ready before you can start. Okay. So here's another interesting team that I met, and so this team is an Egyptian company. So if you've ever gone to Egypt, driving in Egypt is an adventure in and of itself. So I've been to all parts of the world, through India to the largest cities in India, and Egypt actually eclipsed kind of the traffic chaos that I saw in India. So what this is kind of a busing application. So there are these independent microbuses that come at kind of odd times of the day, and so this organization or this company decided to try to organize the microbuses in Egypt. Okay. So not only, so they've grown, so one of the things that has happened is that they've grown dramatically, okay? So, and in that growth, and we've seen it with numerous services in the Middle East and Africa, with that growth, typically organizations will grow in some sort of functional context, but, with advising and speaking to these organizations, they're able to grow in a much better way because of understanding kind of structural nuances of growth and scaling. So my point here is that looking at problems, okay, looking at specific problems that are big problems in different parts of the world, or in this part of the world, these organizations have worked with individual customers, or in individual people with specific problems to be able to solve kind of much larger problems than they would have been able to just coming up with things by following structures by which the teams are detached from customers, right? And so that's that's basically one of the things that I wanted to focus on today was looking at how, as organizations, how you can create, teams inside of organizations that actually deliver value immediately, right? So looking at, instead of waiting on all of the, because when I go into these organizations and I talk to the leadership, and I tell them you're going to have to make these kind of structural changes. These structural change, and I tell them, the various reasons for the structural changes. People are not, they're not really willing to make those changes immediately in order to enable a kind of an agile operating system, so to speak. But what they are willing to do is to experiment. So what we do is create an environment of experimentation and working with teams and working with customers. Okay. Okay, and so I found this to be much easier to then segue into much larger, as people see success, success breeds success, right? So as people see success, then they, you have some wins, and then they realize, we need to invest more in this, right? So, and then they realize we need to invest more in this, and then they realize all of the organizational impediments. We need to invest in removing those impediments, and they start to, and then they understand the need for organizational, restructuring and changing. So that's basically it. That's all I really wanted to cover. If anybody has any questions or concerns with anything I said, go right ahead. So
I'm sorry, I wasn't mute. Feel free to post questions directly to Tim, folks, or if you prefer to put it in the chat. Tim, how would you like to take them?
I can take them and
Actually, live would be better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Any questions, folks? Just pick out.
Hey, Tim, I posted a few questions on the chat.
Okay.
But I can ask them as well.
What were is this you? What were the metrics to measure effectiveness of customer centricity? So one of the, one of the obvious ones is things like Net Promoter Score, but things like, so one of the things that we like to measure is obviously Net Promoter Score, but also the actual usage of specific parts of the application. It's one of the things that I coach a lot about. And so for example, as you're adding features, how much, what's the actual usage of a particular feature? So how many of your users are actually using a specific feature, and what's been added versus what's been added. So a lot of product organizations have ideas about specific feature sets, but are not testing, not measuring the actual usage of those features. How do you deal with remote teams? How do you get them close to the customer? So is that clear? So the teams organized to deliver the customer centricity. These teams are organized around, so the first case, the e-services platform, they were organized around specific domains. So not really a Spotify mission, so I wouldn't say it like that. So there was, in the MOI, there's specific, so as I said, there's specific domains like passports or driver's license or prisons or visas. So these specific domains, teams were generally working with users across these domains in three areas. So we had business, we had government, and we had individuals. So we had kind of an individuals teams that worked only with individuals and those e-services that affected actual individuals. We had teams that were working with government, with dealing with those features or administrative features that the government had to deliver. And also there's some G2G services. So there were teams working around those actual G2G services. And then we had people working with businesses. So there's some services around businesses. Okay. So these teams were they were working, basically like this. So that's how they were organized. Okay. How to deal with remote teams, how do you get them close to the customer? So one of the things that we do now, with our teams is that I don't know if you guys are still all working probably remotely. If you can see here, so we generally have people here, but it's late at night here, so generally we have people in the office, and we have these remote sessions. So we have remote refinement, for example. So in remote refinement, we actually do bring customers into that refinement. So that's one of the things that happens, because we actually have teams placed in different parts of the world, and some of them are working on different parts of the applications. And so customers actually do come into some of those refinement sessions. How do you move from idea to value delivery? There are always lots of ideas. So to me, I tell some of the guys who know me from the Les group, to me, it's all Scrum. I have Scrum for startups, which is, I guess, sort of lean startup, and Scrum for this, kind of discovering, which is kind of like, I think for me, the greatest thing, I think to me, the greatest thing of Scrum or is probably inspect and adapt. So you have a particular problem you want to validate. Okay, so one of the things that we do, we send a team off to validate it. So imagine you have a set of 5 or 6 teams. You've seen, as part of this sprint, this team is working on validating a particular idea with actual customers. Okay, and so that's the way that we do that. We don't have a separate discovery process. We really do put it on the teams, and that may mean that in one sprint a team doesn't do any development. So that's one of the way. But for us, it's getting us closer to. They have particular hypothesis. That hypothesis we do use, OKRs quite a bit. So we have particular hypothesis that we want to validate, and so from that hypothesis, we take a team out and and they're responsible for doing that validation. So once again, as you know, I've had my own startup. So I only think in terms of Scrum, and probably think in terms of less now, more, and that it's very similar to a lean startup type process. So where we do some, right now we're doing some customer discovery. That's a team working on that discovery, literally. So we have cards, but that's not a separate team. That's not developers. That's a team of developers and developers and designers and a couple of people from marketing as well, working as a Scrum team. Okay. How did I handle the messy way approach in KSA? I have experienced all kind of things in KSA. So I would say that people here, your reputation precedes you. So if you have a good reputation, I'm considered, a lot of people. I just take projects that I think that there's some value that I can add. So I don't have to. I generally haven't dealt with a lot of messy project managers, but so I apologize if that's not a good enough answer. So one of the things that I believe is in transparency. So I'm extremely transparent, and I help create teams that are very transparent. So and so by doing that, they expect transparency. Some people love it and some people hate it. Those people that hate it don't generally work with me very long, and so that's I guess that's the best way I can put it. Oh, excellent. So when forming a team, how were the skills identified? And please share any details on how the team handled the skills gap. So a lot of times, there are various different ways that we've done it. So we might be missing a particular skill. So we look at what skills are required for the particular challenge that we have, and also I'm fairly well known for this. We've taken people that couldn't write a line of code, and within 6 months, made them fairly proficient people are programming if that's what they want to do. I've taken teams that had no technical skill and mixed them in with teams with technical skill. I've taken over departments like that, so I've been on national programs for just various different things. And what we do is we do a lot of pairing. We pair them with senior team members that may have a particular skill. So an example of this is, and you can, I could give you these guys' contacts on LinkedIn, is where we've literally taken people, and when I come into an organization, I find a lot of times that there's a huge skills gap, and so I try to ask the guys, okay, if you can wave a magic wand, what is it that you would love to do, right? So what if you could, if you don't have, but you've got to have a skill, right? So you can't just be, someone on a team without a skill. So once they choose that particular skill, I try to make sure that the organization invests in developing that skill. And so that includes, training, virtual training. When the pandemic wasn't there, obviously going to various trainings, helping guide them through that process, and obviously working with the team and pairing with different people on the team depending on the skill type. I'm quite well known for this. So to answer the question, initially looking at what they want to do, where their interests lie, and then helping them take the next steps, and that includes training and obviously on the job pairing with more senior team members. What are the mechanisms you have used to keep the customer focus going once you finish in? It's just part of the process. So our refinement has to have customers in it. So I'll give an example. So I was working on you can look it up. It's called Doroob, DOROOB.SA. So I was working on a platform that was a national e-learning platform. So this was to try to help the local population improve their skills and solve the skills gap. So this had, when I came there, they had about 5,000 course completions for various reasons in about a year of being live. So, and that course completion was kind of their core KPI to get more people to take courses, right? So to get more people to take these courses, so we did two things. One, we brought users actually into the refinement to understand why they're not completing. So we also did some surveys, and we brought people in, and then we brought people, the core stakeholder from the government in, which had never ever spoken to really any users. So they had never experienced that, and one of the things that I'm also known for is probably being a bit of a hard ass, but that we wouldn't proceed without them coming. So I said, well, guys, I can't build this if you don't come and talk to the customers. So finally, we got the stakeholder and customers in refinement. Literally every 2 weeks, we used to have all day refinement. So and that's one of the ways you keep that customer focus growing. I don't know how to build products. I just don't, because I'm not that smart of how to build products that you don't have active engagement and you aren't tracking core underlying metrics, right? So if you've ever heard of, kind of in lean startup, there are kind of some core what they call pirate metrics, some acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral type metrics that they kind of track. So nevertheless, I don't, every team has kind of different outcome metrics, but I don't know how you can really understand what's needed without doing quite a bit of understanding of not only, bringing the customers, but also sometimes going into the actual customer environment as well. At the early stage, so at the early stage of development, was the team focused on building the foundational elements, or were they always focused on development? So what do you mean by foundational elements? I don't know what you mean specifically.
So say, for example, setting up the infrastructure, setting up the database, it's more of a technical aspect.
No. So
the experience of it.
So we generally cover that, and probably so if you're starting from scratch, I'd say you could cover most of that, especially depending on what your infrastructure is like. So let's go with two scenarios. One is the infrastructure that's kind of in-house infrastructure, right? So you're not using any kind of AWS or Azure or something like that. So in-house infrastructure generally has a lot. Generally, at least here in Saudi, leaves a lot to be desired. So those teams generally cause the biggest are kind of the biggest barriers to agility, because you don't have really any automation. We were working with a large government organization, and they were building out kind of simultaneously. They initially went with 1 month sprints to build out some aspects of that. And so the initial kind of 2 sprints were 1 month long, okay? After that, then they moved to kind of more 2 month sprint, 2 week sprints. But so I've seen here, but generally when we have access to kind of, a more cloud enabled infrastructure, where we can leverage kind of the automation components already being there, then it's just a couple of days, honestly. I mean, to be perfectly honest. Most of the teams I do work with, we use something called, I work mostly in web, so web and mobile development. So just to be clear, with obviously some recommendation engines, machine learning, stuff like that. But those we use something called, so most of the teams I work with are Java teams, Java Spring teams. So they use something called JHipster, which is kind of a scaffolding tool that really speeds up things dramatically. And most of the times we use a design system, so we don't design things really from scratch. We either choose an existing one or work to be able so that we can basically rapidly iterate. So generally we will choose an existing design system and some front end technology and like I said, we would use kind of the cloud infrastructure and some scaffolding tool set that would help us rapidly iterate. So the first release, literally 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, honestly, if you have all of that in place. So if you, once again, design system. So when I say design system, if you're not familiar with it, it's literally some sort of templating system that already exists from a front end perspective. There's material, for example. There's a lot of different. We like to use kind of a lot of Material Pro type design system, and so the components are already there, and then we just add to the library as part of our development. So with worldwide teams, how do you deal with cross-team dependencies? So cross-team dependencies. So we, with those cross-team dependencies, we literally, so when we're in refinement, we have breakout rooms. So in Zoom, if you look in Zoom, there are these breakout rooms. So when we start, so we start kind of like in a multi-team. Well, it's really depending on the size of the team, but we would start with some sort of multi-team refinement. And in that, and obviously in planning. So the two times this will come up is in when you're refining, and then when it's time to plan. You have to determine. So once a priority has been set in refinement and in planning, verified before you go into the next sprint. So looking at this, you would say, okay, so you have to ask the question, okay, are there, for this sprint, do we see any cross-team dependencies? It's just a conversation inside of planning and refinement. If so, we get together and refine together. So those two teams, which just happened last Friday, because we have this rolling refinement. So those teams that have these dependencies, they speak together in the refinement and refine those things together inside of the breakout room, right? So inside of that breakout room, and then when we come back to then we generally come back together after at the end of a refinement session, and that kind of goes back and forth. So we will list all the things at the beginning of the refinement where we think there's kind of overlap between the teams, and we'll mention them, and then the teams will go into the refinement and have a discussion and come back out at the end. Same thing in the planning. So in sprint planning 1, we're just covering all of the items, and then we say, okay, are there kind of any cross-team dependencies that we need to make sure that we cover? And then we go in sprint planning 2, so you'll see 2 teams or 3 teams or however many teams that have the dependencies in that breakout room, okay? Have you had to deal with Ivory Tower stakeholders?
Tim, just one word of warning messages. So 1 o'clock, it's on the hour. Just I'm happy if we can stick around for a little longer, but people might start dropping. So, and if you're happy,
okay.
Are you comfortable to stay on for another few minutes?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, just want to make sure you are. Okay. All right, take another one.
Okay, so have I had to deal with Ivory Tower stakeholders? Yes, I have, but that's what I said. So reputation in Saudi, okay, reputation counts a lot. So okay, so like I said, I tend to be a bit of a hard ass. So so I just say I can't proceed, and so that's a negotiation back and forth. So I have had that, but really I've met with the person who used to be the crown prince of Saudi Arabia and told them we couldn't deliver something by a certain time. So it just you have to be transparent. And if people, I remember the biggest compliment I got was like the one customer asked, is Tim, are those teams really that good? And a really high-level government customer told this other customer, he said, if he says it can be done, believe it can be done. If he says it can't be done, believe it can't be done. So it's just, so your reputation will give you a bit of an edge with being convincing. And I like to tell my teams who don't have that kind of probably the reputation, just to say, look, transfer the risk. So one of the ways one of the ways I tell them, I say, well, tell the ask the person, well, we don't feel like we can do the best X if we're not able to interact with the customers. But if you really feel that if you want to take responsibility for any shortcomings of doing this, then we may be. I guess we can do it if you're going to take the responsibility. And so that transferring of risk kind of gets people moving a bit.
I'm in the hot spot.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, folks, any more questions for Tim? Thank you so much so far, Tim. But see if anyone else wants to chime in. I know we a couple minutes past the hour. We have some people that dropped already. So if there are no more questions, Tim, first of all, from me personally and from the whole, community, many thanks for joining at this late hour and sharing your definitely rich experience in this. Very valuable. I'm happy you were able to come out. Maybe we can do it again.
Yeah. It was thanks, guys, and it was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna zap it into a video, and then I'm gonna have it available in a little bit. Shoot me the deck over if you don't mind as PDF as soon as you can, and I'll send you cash.
All right, no problem. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks to everyone. To everyone who joined today. Thank you, folks. Cheers. Bye-bye.